our Diamond Accelerator weekly group coaching call. My name is Amanda Thatcher. I'm a senior business consultant here at Diamond. My colleague Sherry Jones and I will also be reviewing what's new in aesthetics and how it impacts your revenue. So we're really glad you're here because today's conversation is one of those that, if you actually apply it, can change how your clinic operates almost immediately. It's not just what you're offering, but how you're positioning it, how your providers are consulting, and ultimately how much revenue you're generating per patient. Today's conversation is going to be a little bit different. Yes, we're going to walk through a few recent FDA updates, industry shifts, and what's happening in aesthetics right now. But more importantly, we're going to show you how to actually use this information inside your business. Because here's the truth. Most clinics hear updates like this and they think, oh, that's interesting, and then nothing changes. And the clinics that actually grow, they take that same information and turn it into new services, better consults, higher ticket treatment plans, and stronger patient retention. So as you're listening today, I want you thinking, where am I underutilizing what I already have? Where is my team undereducating patients? And where am I leaving revenue on the table? So, Sherry, let's start with one of the biggest updates this month.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amanda. And yes, we have very exciting updates for you. And the first up is that Radiesse is now approved for the décolleté. And this is where I want everyone to really lean in because this is where we see clinics miss the opportunity all the time. So just a few weeks ago, it was announced that Radiesse is now approved for the treatment of wrinkles in the in the décolleté area. And what happens is clinics hear that, think, great, we have something new to offer. But they don't ask the more important question, how do I monetize this? And because a new treatment does not automatically mean new revenue, this is just a treatment. It's not just a treatment. It's a new category. It's an add-on. It's an opportunity to drive better results.
Exactly. And what I want to clarify as well is that this approval is for the décolleté, but clinically, what this represents is something bigger. It's continued validation that biostimulators are for more than just the face. The studies focus on collagen production, improvement of skin texture, and reduction in increasing over time. And what we're seeing is that patients are becoming more and more aware of aging in areas like the chest, especially with sun damage and volume loss. The old saying was, what you do to your face, you do to your neck. What you do to your face, you do to your whole body. But they're not walking in asking for Radiesse. They're saying, oh, I think my skin looks older here. This bothers me in photos. My makeup doesn't match. And this is really where implementation becomes everything. So I work with a clinic that already has Radiesse. And they have this product, they've had the training, they had the ability, but they weren't really selling it. And when we looked at what was happening, it was really simple. No one was bringing it up. If the patient didn't ask, it did not get discussed. So we made one shift, and it was a big one. We trained the providers to incorporate the upper body aging into every consult that it made sense. Not selling, not pushing, just educating. And we're talking about the overall composure in the consultation. Here's what we can improve over time. Within 2 months, just barely 60 days, that clinic went from maybe doing one treatment occasionally to consistently selling packages, not single treatments. They were bundling Radiesse with laser, with skincare, with maintenance. So instead of just adding one syringe at $800, they were adding $2,000 to $3,000 per patient. It was the same product, the same team, but we implemented it differently. And we saw amazing results.
And that is the difference right there. Most clinics don't have a product problem, they have a consult problem because your consult's either making you money or it's losing you money. If your provider is only responding to what the patient asked for, you stay at a very low ticket. If they guide the conversation, if they educate, they expand the opportunity. And instead of presenting this as a standalone, you're positioning it as a upper body rejuvenation. And now you've elevated it. Now they can easily layer the Radiesse with laser resurfacing, with the Thin Care. And now you're not just selling a $700, $900 treatment, you're actually presenting a full comprehensive treatment plan up to $2,000 to $4,000. And nothing changed at all except how you positioned it.
And that positioning actually aligns better with outcomes as well. So another new update is that Restylane Contour is now approved for temple hollowing. And this is a really important one because it reinforces the concept of structural agent, not just treating lines, but really restoring volume and balance. Volume loss in the temples contributes to hollowing, a loss of lift, more fatigued appearance overall. And when we treat this area, it impacts the entire face. This is where I really want everyone to hear this because it's one of the biggest shifts you can make. So, for example, I was working with a client and we had providers that were doing great work clinically, really exceptional. But their consult style was very reactive. The patient says, "Oh, I want lips or Botox or under eye filler." And they would do that. But what happens next is that those are small one-time visits, $400, $600, $900, and then they move on. But when we train people to step back and look at that full picture, we see volume loss, structure, balance, long-term outcomes, and everything really changed. We saw providers going from $500 an hour to easily over $1,500 an hour, sometimes close to $2,000. They were not working more, they were not seeing more patients, but they were really educating them and thinking differently.
And I want to build on that because I saw this exact shift in another clinic. The provider was fully booked. They were absolutely busy every day, but the owner kept saying, "We're not hitting the revenue we should be." So we audited the consults. And what we saw was very transactional care, a quick tox, a quick filler, a quick in and out appointment. And the great outcomes, but very, very limited revenue. And when we train that provider to just slow down just slightly, not longer appointments, just a better, more guided conversation, instead of "What would you like to do today?" it became a "Let's talk about your overall goals. What's going to get you that long-term result?" And when we introduced phased comprehensive treatment plans, within 90 days, revenue per hour more than doubled. And it was the same schedule for the provider. They were seeing the same patients, but they were out the results were very different. And that's the difference between busy and being profitable. And that is why approvals like the temple filler actually really matter because they support full facial balancing. And you're not just treating one area, you're treating the whole face. And that's how you increase that ticket value, outcomes, and retention.
On a side note, I was on a call with a client the other day who said to me, "Oh my God, I'm just so distracted. You need temple filler." And I about died laughing. But let's talk peptides. So there's a lot of conversation around this, and I hear this from people all the time, and they're like, "I don't know." So this is a very gray area. So I want to simplify it. Peptides are not broadly FDA approved as drugs right now, but there is a movement toward a more structured regulation, especially allowing compounding pharmacies to prepare certain peptides under physician oversight. So this is about structure and not full approval. And honestly, it's a really positive shift because it raises the standard across the industry. We all know that there are cowboys out there. And this is where clinics need to decide who they want to be, the one that's chasing trends or the ones that are building credible systems. And this really aligns as well with where healthcare is going. personalized, preventative, ongoing care.
Exactly. So what we've been advising clients to do is clean up your messaging when it comes to weight loss, peptide, and HRT patients. Keep it medically grounded. Focus on the outcomes because patients are getting smarter. They're not just asking what's new, they're asking what works, and that builds the trust. Along with more peptides, we're seeing continued growth with GLP-1 and hormone therapy. And clinically, as we know, weight management is rarely just a weight issue. It's hormones, metabolism, lifestyle, and stress. And this is one of the biggest opportunities we're seeing. Clinics that offer GLP-1 as a one-time visit. It's your weight loss patients. They're just totally untapped. They're coming in, they're getting their medications, and they're leaving. And we struggle with that inconsistent revenue. But when we can structure it into a GLP-1, HRT, peptides, ongoing support in a monthly program, everything changes. Your patients are staying longer, their outcomes improve, and revenue becomes predictable. And we've seen clinics go from inconsistent revenue to stable, reoccurring monthly revenue streams. And the best part, the patients are getting better results. And it's because we're treating the whole system.
And clinically, that's exactly what we want.
And operationally, that's how you build a scalable business.
So let's simplify this. Updates like Radiesse for the décolleté create opportunity. Approvals like Wrestle and Contour for temple filler really reinforce full treatment planning. And peptides are moving toward more structured, physician-guided use. And think about GLP-1s and HRT as being built into long-term programs, not just quick visits.
And if you take just one thing from today's call, stop thinking in services. Yes, you need to know the updates and you want to know everything new that's coming down the pike, but we want to start thinking in systems and plans and patient journeys because the FDA approvals do create attention, but your business model creates revenue.
Exactly. And if your systems are strong, every new treatment becomes a multiplier. All righty, let's take some questions. Let's see, who do we have in here? Hi, Dr. Brad. How are you?
Back to my chat.
Let's see, we have Bree and all right, some questions. I understand the full treatment planning, but what do you say to providers who feel like, hold on, they are too salesy or when they expand beyond their patient, what their patient asks for? Let's see. So this is a brilliant question. So the full question is, I understand that the full treatment planning, but what do you say to providers who feel like they're being too salesy when they expand beyond what the patient asks for? So this is a really important question. And this is where our mindset has to shift. So we're going to expand beyond what the patient asks for is not being salesy, but it's being an educator and an expert and a provider. If a patient comes in asking for lips, but you can clearly see volume loss in the mid face and you don't address it, you're really doing them a disservice. And if you change your mindset from being salesy to being an educator and the expert that you are, you're actually doing them a disservice. The key is how you communicate it. You can say, you know, you want to guide them with an education, right? They're coming to you as those experts, as the authority that you are. So I want you to use verbiage like, here's what I'm seeing overall. Here's what's contributing to that concern. And here's how we can approach it over time. That's not selling. That's prescribing and that's building a treatment plan. And what we've seen across multiple clinics is that when providers shift into that role as that guide and expert, patients actually trust them more and not less. So when revenue increases, it's rooted in outcomes, not transactions. It's rooted in the painted picture that you've created for your clients.
Absolutely. Great question there. We have some
I see another
Instagram viewers.
question here. Sure, you can take this one. What if we already offer these services, but our team just isn't consistently talking about them or converting them into packages?
That's exactly where most clinics actually are right now. It's not a service gap, it's an execution gap. And so the first thing we can do when we look at it, it's not a marketing issue. It is the consult. So are your providers really trained on how to introduce these services naturally? Are they confident explaining the why behind them? And are they thinking in single treatments or full plans? Because if they're not bringing up in the room, it's not going to happen. The second piece is that structure. You need a clear treatment plan framework that your team can follow consistently. So, for example, if a patient presents with aging in the chest, what is the standard recommendation? Radius alone or a layered plan? And when you standardize that thinking, the consistency improves because they know what your expectation is. They know what the deliverable should be. And when consistency improves, your revenue improves. So we've definitely seen clinics increase packages dramatically just by implementing the consult structure and scripting and not adding anything new.
All right, we have another question. How do you transition patients from one-time treatments like GLP-1 into longer-term programs without overwhelming them?
That is a great question because this is where a lot of clinics also lose that long-term revenue. The mistake is trying to sell that entire program up front before we really understand what is working with the patient. And that's where the medical provider can create the dialogue and the trust building by assessing their current state and what can be done in addition to the GLP-1, because that is typically what our patients come in for. You know, we've GLP-1s have blown up. We have a lot of new patients coming in just for weight loss. So absolutely, we want to focus on that for them, but we want to position it as a journey. We want to explain where their current status is. How are they doing on their current dosage? And then once we have them very comfortable and we've stabilized that, we're going to introduce what's next. So, once we stabilize them, we're going to look at your hormones. We're going to support your metabolism and we're going to build a long-term plan. So instead of that one-time visit, the patient truly understands that there's a roadmap. And what we've seen with that when patients understand the full picture, even if they don't commit to everything that very first day, they're much more likely to stay engaged long term as they know they're receiving that ongoing support and guidance at their monthly appointments. And that's how you move from that transactional care to a reoccurring revenue stream. And that's also how you improve the outcomes because you're supporting the whole patient and not just one symptom.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. And GLP-1s are not just for wellness and weight loss, but they really do lead into aesthetics. Studies show that we're losing collagen at rapid rates on GLP-1s. It is a really easy program to set up to set your clients up for the expectation that they're going to have to do collagen stimulating treatments along with their GLP-1s. So it's a wide open runway where there are so many programs and things that your clients get into that are not just those one-time shoppers. Let's see. Do we have any more questions in here?
I don't see
Well,
any in the chat.
I am not seeing any more. But if you loved this training, make sure you share with your team or another med spa that could benefit from it. You can always catch the replay on our YouTube channel. To get access to more free trainings that will help you grow your med spa, visit our link tree in our social bio and be sure to join us live every Wednesday, 2:30 Central Time. Same place, same time. Find us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn.